The viewing chamber was cold and quiet. It was a huge circular room, floating in space near the edge of the galactic core. The walls were a smooth, dark material that showed the starfield outside. In the center of the room, a large, glowing hologram showed a blue and green planet. It was labeled Korea 332. Around the hologram, in a wide circle, were the assessors. There were 3 main assessors for this trial. Borlu was from the Korvax species. He looked like a moving statue made of purple crystal. His thoughts were slow, logical, and very cold. Next to him was Clix. Clix was an insectoid being, with a hard, shiny shell and many sharp limbs. He was a military expert. He had judged over 50 species. He believed strength was the only thing that mattered. The third was Nlara. She was a being of shimmering, colored gas held in a graceful container. She was an expert in mind and spirit. She looked for breaks in the will. Other aliens were there too, in the shadows. They were observers from many species. All of them were old members of the Galactic Consensus. They had passed their own trials long ago. Today, they would watch a new species try to pass. The trial was simple. The AI would run a simulation. The goal of the assessors was to watch the species and find its breaking point. The official command for the AI was, "Find the fragile species." A small door opened in the smooth wall. A young man walked in. He was Kim Ji-hun. He was the human liaison. He wore a simple gray suit. His hair was black and neat. His face was calm, but his hands were held tightly together. He was the only human allowed to watch. His job was not to speak. His job was only to observe and to answer if the assessors had a direct question about human biology. He was not allowed to defend his people. He was not allowed to explain. He bowed slightly to the 3 main assessors and took his seat at a small, separate console. It was far from them. Borlu, the crystal being, turned his faceted head. His voice sounded like rocks gently tapping together. The candidate species is Homo sapiens. Baseline review shows average physical strength. Low. Bone density is poor. Nervous system is overloaded with emotional feedback. Conclusion. High probability of failure. Clix made a clicking sound with his mandibles. It was a laugh. I have seen their history. They war with themselves constantly over small ideas and pieces of land. Their technology is primitive. Their strategy is based on emotion, not logic. Fragility will be found in their discipline. It will break under pressure. Nlara's colors swirled softly, a pale blue. Her voice was like a whisper in the mind. Their minds are a storm of fear, love, and anger. These conflicts make them weak. The simulation will find the cracks. We will see them turn on each other. It is always the way. Ji-hun listened. He said nothing. He looked at the hologram of Earth. He saw the Korean peninsula highlighted. The simulation would use a familiar landscape for the test subjects. It would feel like home to them. This was supposed to be a small mercy, but Ji-hun knew it was a sharper cruelty. To fail in a place that looks like your home is harder. The chief overseer of the trial, a tall being with silver skin, spoke to the room. His voice was neutral. The simulation is ready. The subject group is 10 military units of the candidate species. Their recent memories have been altered. They believe they are in a real conflict. The trial AI is active. Begin. The central hologram changed. It no longer showed the planet. It now showed a ruined city. The sky was a strange red color. Buildings were broken and burning. On the ground, 10 figures in military gear moved carefully through the rubble. They looked human. They moved like soldiers. Their faces inside their helmets were tense and focused. Borlu accessed the data stream. Designation: Squad 7. Leader is Sergeant Park Soo-min. Vital signs are elevated but within expected parameters for stress. Clix watched their movements. Their formation is basic. Their weapons are inefficient kinetic projectiles. They are already vulnerable. Nlara focused on the brainwave readings. The fear is there. It is simmering under the surface. It is waiting. Ji-hun looked at the face of Sergeant Park Soo-min on his private screen. She had a sharp look in her eyes. She was scanning the rooftops. He knew that look. It was not just fear. It was watchfulness. It was responsibility. He also saw Medic Lee Tae-shik. He was staying close to the middle of the group, his medical pack obvious. His eyes were kind even now. Ji-hun felt a pain in his chest. He knew these people. He was these people. And he had to sit and watch aliens pick them apart like a machine being tested for faults. The first drones appeared. They were sleek, silver machines that flew silently. They fired bright bolts of energy. The simulation had begun. The humans reacted. They shouted warnings. They took cover behind broken walls. They fired their rifles. The sound was loud in the quiet viewing chamber. The assessors watched the data. They saw heart rate spike. They saw adrenaline flow. They were waiting for the first mistake, the first scream of pure panic, the first sign that the fragile species was breaking. But the scream did not come. Instead, they heard Sergeant Sumin's voice, clear and steady. Focus fire on the left. Dae-ho watched the flank. The squad moved. They listened. They covered each other. Clicks clicked. Annoyed. They are holding. For now. The pressure is not enough. Borlu agreed. Increase the difficulty. The fragility must be revealed. Nlara's colors turned a mild yellow, a sign of curiosity. Their fear is present, but it is not controlling them. It is being used. Ji-hun allowed himself a very small breath. It was only the first minute. The hardest tests were coming. He looked from the calm, alien faces of the assessors to the desperate, living faces of his people in the hellish simulation. The trial to find the fragile species had truly begun. And in the cold, silent gallery, no one yet knew who was really being tested. The ruined city in the hologram was eerily quiet after the first drone attack. Smoke drifted from blasted buildings. Sergeant Park Sumin signaled for her squad to hold position. They crouched in the shattered lobby of an old office building. Their breathing was loud in their helmets. Report status, Sumin whispered into her comms. One by one, her soldiers checked in. Ammo half. Got a graze on my arm, it's fine. All green. My ears are ringing. Sumin looked at Medic Lee Tae-shik. He was already moving quietly from soldier to soldier, his hands quick and gentle. He pressed a sealant patch on the grazed arm. He checked the eyes of the one whose ears were ringing. He gave a small nod. No major damage yet. Tae-shik's face was calm, but his eyes missed nothing. He saw the tightness in a young private's jaw. He saw how another soldier's hands shook slightly. He stored the information away. Fear was a wound, too. It just needed a different kind of medicine. In the observation gallery, the assessors watched these small actions. Clicks pointed a sharp limb at Tae-shik's data feed. See? Inefficiency. The combat medic is treating minor injuries. He should be conserving his resources for critical damage. This is poor resource management. A sign of softness. Borlu, the crystal being, analyzed the biometrics. The one called Private Kong Dae-ho shows elevated cortisol. The one called Choi Hygiene has an erratic heart rhythm. The stress is accumulating. It is a mathematical certainty. They will crack. Nlara watched the emotional frequencies. The colors in her container swirled with soft blues and grays. They are leaning on each other. Listen. She amplified the audio from the squad's private channel. They could hear low voices. Hey, Dae-ho, you okay? Breathe. I'm good. Just, this place looks like Daegu. I know. Think of your mom's kimchi jjigae. Better than this smoke. Faint, shaky laugh. They are using social bonds to stabilize themselves, Lara observed. It is a temporary solution. When the bonds break, the collapse will be total. Ji-hun, the human liaison, listened to this. He kept his face blank. He wanted to tell them that the bond was not a bandage. It was the foundation, but he was not allowed to speak. Sumin signaled to move. The squad slipped out of the building and into a wide street littered with debris. Their mission objective blinked on their helmet displays. Reach the extraction point at Grid Alpha 7. It was 3 kilometers through the city. They moved in pairs, covering each angle. They were professionals. But the simulation was designed by a galaxy of experts. It knew how to press. Without warning, the ground trembled. A building 2 blocks ahead collapsed with a roar that shook the screen in the observation gallery. A wave of dust and rubble rolled toward the squad. "Take cover! Now!" Sumin yelled. The soldiers dove behind overturned vehicles and into doorways. The dust cloud washed over them, turning the world a choking gray. On their sensors, everything went fuzzy. In the gallery, clicks clicked with approval. Good. Sensory deprivation. Disorientation. This will trigger isolated panic. The soldiers' comms filled with static and coughs. "Stay on channel. Sound off." Sumin barked. One by one, voices came back. "Here. Here. I'm here." They waited for the last voice. "Private Choi Hygiene." "Hygiene. Report." Sumin called. A weak cough. "Here. Sergeant. My leg. Something's on it." The dust began to settle. Hygiene was pinned from the knees down by a fallen concrete slab. It wasn't crushing, but it was solid. She was trapped. The squad immediately formed a protective circle around her. Taeshik was at her side in an instant, scanning the slab with a small tool. "It's too heavy to lift without equipment. Possible fracture underneath. No major bleeding." Hygiene's face was pale. "I'm sorry, Sergeant." "Don't be," Sumin said, her eyes scanning the rooftops. "Taeshik, how long to free her?" 10 minutes with the kinetic jack. Maybe 12. "We don't have 12, said another soldier, Kang Daeho. "We're sitting ducks here." The assessors watched the conflict. This was a perfect test. Mission objective versus group loyalty. Logic versus emotion. "Now we will see," Borlu intoned. "The logical choice is clear. Leave the injured unit. Preserve the mission and the majority. It is the consensus of all advanced species." Clix agreed. "If they stay, they will all die. A true soldier understands sacrifice. If they are too emotional to leave her, they are fragile." On the screen, Sumin did not hesitate. "Daeho, you and Minji get the jack from Taeshik's pack and start setting it up. June, take point on that rooftop. Watch for drones. We are not leaving her." In the gallery, Clix's mandibles clacked loudly in frustration. "Foolish. It is a tactical error." But Jihun saw something else. He saw Hygiene's biometrics. Her panic spiked when she was trapped. But the moment Sumin said, "We are not leaving her," the line on the screen stabilized. The fear did not go away, but it was joined by something else. A fierce, stubborn determination. Taeshik was talking to Hygiene softly, giving her an injection for the pain. "You'll be fine. We'll have you out soon. Just look at me. Breathe." Nlara's colors pulsed, turning a shade of mild orange, signaling confusion. They are choosing the illogical path. But the unit's collective stress level is decreasing, not increasing. They have a shared purpose now. The trapped one is no longer a burden. She is the mission. The kinetic jack whirred, starting to lift the slab. The soldiers worked together, their movements coordinated. They were vulnerable, but they were focused. They were not a group of individuals about to break. They had become a single organism, determined to save its trapped part. The trial AI, monitoring everything, registered the deviation from predicted behavior. It adjusted. High above the street, on a broken bridge, 6 new drone signatures flickered to life. They took aim at the huddled squad below. The real pressure was about to begin. The drones on the broken bridge were silent predators. They did not fire. Not yet. They simply watched the soldiers below with their cold, electronic eyes. The squad knew they were there. The warning icons flashed on their helmet displays. Under the concrete slab, Private Choi Hygiene's breath hitched. "They're waiting for the jack to finish," she whispered, her voice tight with pain. "When I'm free, that's when they'll fire." Medic Lee Taeshik kept pressure on her leg. "Then we'll be ready. Don't think about them. Think about walking out of here." The kinetic jack whirred, lifting the heavy slab inch by inch. Sergeant Park Sumin watched the bridge. Her mind was clear, cold. She had a plan, but it was a bad one. It required perfect timing and a lot of luck. Minji, smoke grenades. On my mark, cover the entire street. Daeho, the second she's free, you carry her. Taeshik, you cover them. We run for that alley. She pointed to a narrow opening between two buildings, 50 meters away. Felt like a kilometer. In the observation gallery, Clix was almost pleased. Finally, a direct threat to the injured unit. This will force the choice. Carry her and slow down, guaranteeing death. Or leave her and survive. The math is absolute. Borlu watched the stress numbers climb. The medic's heart rate is elevated. The sergeant's breathing is shallow. The point of failure is near. But Nlara was quiet. Her gaseous form swirled. A deep, thoughtful indigo. She was watching Medic Taeshik's neural feed. It was a storm of fear, yes. But the fear had a specific shape. It wasn't fear for himself. The data was clear. His primary fear was failing hygiene. His secondary fear was that Sumin would get hurt giving the order to retreat. His own survival was a distant third. This was illogical. It was backwards. Fascinated her. The trial AI made its move. It did not fire the drones. Instead, it released a weapon the assessors had requested, the Phantasm Agent. It was a colorless, odorless gas designed to interact with the brain's fear centers. It did not cause physical harm. It made you see and feel your deepest, most personal terrors. The soldiers did not see the gas. One moment they were watching the drones. The next, the world changed. For Kang Daeho, the ruined street melted away. He was back in his little sister's hospital room, the beeping of the monitors deafening. She was looking at him, scared, asking why he couldn't stay. The concrete dust in the air became the smell of antiseptic. For Sumin, the broken buildings became the wreckage of a training accident from years ago. A young recruit, whose face she could never forget, was pinned under a vehicle, reaching for her. She heard her own younger voice, frozen, unable to give the right order. But the worst hit was Lee Taeshik. For him, the world did not change location. The street remained. Hygiene was still trapped. But her face, it shifted. It became the face of his daughter, Unji. She was 6 years old. She had died 2 years ago in a crosswalk, holding his hand. Now she was under the slab, looking up at him with her wide, trusting eyes. "Appa," she said, her voice small. "It hurts. Why can't you help me?" Taeshik's entire body went rigid. The medical scanner fell from his hand. A sound escaped his lips, a raw gasp of pure agony. On his biometric feed in the gallery, every line spiked into the red. His heart tried to beat out of his chest. His breathing stopped. Clix leaned forward. "There. The breaking point. The caregiver has shattered. The unit will fall apart now." Borlu confirmed. "The emotional overload is catastrophic. He is non-functional." Nlara watched, her colors darkening to a somber gray. She saw the terror, yes, but she was trained to see what happened next. Would he run? Would he scream and break down? On the street, Private Hygiene was lost in her own nightmare, crying for a father she had lost in childhood. Daeho was on his knees, whispering apologies to his sister. Chaos was taking over. Then, Taeshik moved. He did not run. He did not curl up. His body, acting on some deep, stubborn instinct, lunged forward, not away from the horrifying vision, but toward it. His hands, which were shaking violently, found Hygiene's shoulders. He gripped them hard. He was weeping. Tears streamed down his face inside his helmet. His voice, when it came, was broken, thick with grief, and louder than a shout. "Hygiene, look at me." The vision of his daughter flickered. He saw Hygiene's own terrified eyes beneath it. "It's not real," he roared, the words tearing from his throat. He slapped the side of her helmet. Not to hurt, but to shock. "It's a trick. It's a chemical trick. Do you hear me? Hold the line. You hold the damn line." He fumbled at his medical kit. His vision was blurred with tears. He couldn't see the labels, but his hands knew. They found the calmative injector. He stabbed it against Hygiene's neck. Her sobs began to slow, the wild panic in her eyes receding. His own nightmare still screamed in his ears. "Appa, it hurts." He closed his eyes for 1 second, his face a mask of suffering. Then he opened them and turned to Dae-ho. He grabbed the younger man's vest and pulled him up. "Dae-ho, she's not here. Your sister is safe at home. This is the street. Look at the street." He was using his own devastating pain as a tool. He was channeling it into a fierce, protective energy. He moved from soldier to soldier, his voice a ragged command, pulling them back from their private hells. In the gallery, there was a long silence. Clix was utterly still. The tactical breakdown he predicted had not happened. The unit was coalescing around the medic's raw, emotional leadership. Borlu's crystalline surface flickered, a sign of processing error. The subject should be catatonic. The emotional input was maximum. His response is not in the data models. Nlara's colors shifted to a pale, luminous gold. It was the color of profound revelation. "He did not fight the fear," she whispered, her mental voice filled with awe. "He moved through it. He used it. His love for the lost one. It did not make him weak. It became a weapon to protect the living one." She turned her attention slowly from the simulation to the other assessors. "We asked to find fragility. We found a strength we do not have a name for." On the screen, Sergeant Sumin, shaking off her own phantom, saw Tae-shik holding the squad together. She gave him a single, sharp nod. Then her voice, hard and clear, cut through the last of the confusion. "Smoke! Now! Move!" The street filled with gray clouds. The drones above, their targeting confused, began to fire blindly. The fragile moment had passed. The soldiers, wounded in their hearts but unbroken, began to fight their way out. The alley was a tight, dark canyon. The squad stumbled into it, coughing. The smoke from their grenades mixed with the red dust of the city. Private Choi Hygiene was slung over Kong Dae-ho's shoulder, her leg wrapped in a temporary splint. Medic Lee Tae-shik moved last, his medical pack hanging loosely from one hand. His face was still wet with tears, but his eyes were sharp, checking each person as they passed him. Sergeant Park Sumin leaned against the cold brick wall, catching her breath. "Report. Sound off." They did. Everyone was here, but they were not okay. The phantasm agent had left deep, invisible cuts. Eyes were wide. Hands would not stop trembling. The silence between them was heavy with the private horrors they had just seen. "We rest here for 2 minutes," Sumin said, her voice softer than before. "Drink water. Check your gear." In the observation gallery, the mood had changed. The earlier certainty was gone. Clicks shifted on his sharp limbs, a sign of agitation. "They are damaged." The emotional attack was effective. "They are slower. Their cohesion is strained." Borlu analyzed the new data. Biometric readings show collective trauma. Neural pathways are flooded with stress hormones. Logical decision-making capacity is reduced by 37%. This is the predicted outcome of fragility. Nlara did not speak. She was still watching Tae-shik. He was moving among the soldiers again. He wasn't just checking wounds. He was looking into their eyes. He put a hand on Dae-ho's back for a moment. He offered a canteen to Private Minji. He was silently rebuilding the thing the gas had tried to break. He was mending the connections. Sumin looked at her helmet display. The extraction point was still 2 kilometers away, through the densest part of the ruined city center. "We can't go back through the main streets. They'll be waiting. We go through the old subway tunnels. Entry point is 1 block east." It was a risk. Dark, confined, perfect for ambushes. But it was the only path left. The squad moved out, faster now, with a new goal. They found a shattered stairwell leading underground. The world above, with its red sky and drones, was replaced by a darkness broken only by the beams from their helmets. The air was cold and smelled of damp and rust. The only sounds were their boots on broken tile and the distant drip of water. They had been moving for 10 minutes when the tunnel groaned. It was a deep, grinding sound that came from all around them. Before anyone could react, The ceiling 30 meters ahead collapsed with a roar that was deafening in the enclosed space. A wave of dust and debris rushed toward them. They turned and ran back the way they came, but a second, smaller collapse sealed the passage behind them. When the dust settled, they were trapped in a section of tunnel about 40 meters long. Their lights cut through the gloom, showing 2 walls of packed rubble and twisted metal. Sumin's heart sank. Check for a way through. Quickly. There was no way through. The piles were massive. They were sealed in. Then a weak voice. Sergeant. It was Private Kong Dae-ho. He was sitting against the tunnel wall, his face pale. He had been near the front when the first collapse happened. A piece of rebar, sharp and rusty, was sticking out of his side, just above his hip. His hands were pressed around it, dark blood seeping between his fingers. Tae-shik was at his side in an instant. His scanner beeped urgently. Puncture wound. Deep. It's near the kidney. He's bleeding inside. I can stabilize him here, but he needs surgery. Now. The reality of their situation crashed down on them. They were buried. Their air was finite. Dae-ho was dying. The extraction point above them might as well have been on another planet. In the gallery, Clix saw the clear, logical solution. This is the ultimate test. The injured unit is now critical. The mission is impossible. The rational choice is to minimize suffering and preserve resources for the remaining units until the air fails. They must accept the inevitable. Borlu agreed. The probability of the entire squad perishing if they attempt a futile rescue is 94%. The probability of the injured unit surviving, even with rescue, is less than 2%. The correct analysis is clear. They waited for the humans to see this obvious math. On the tunnel floor, Dae-ho understood. His breathing was shallow. Just go. Find a way. Dig. Don't waste time on me. Sergeant Sumin looked at the mountain of rubble in front of them. She looked at the one behind. She looked at Dae-ho's young, scared face. The mission was to reach the extraction point. That mission had failed. Every rule, every piece of logic, said to make their peace and try to dig their way out, leaving the dead behind. Sumin knelt beside Dae-ho. She did not look at the rubble. She looked only at him. Did you hear that, Tae-shik? He's giving orders now. Tae-shik, who was already pulling instruments from his kit, managed a weak smile. He's always been a bad listener. Sumin placed a hand on Dae-ho's shoulder. We are not leaving you. You don't get to quit. She stood up and turned to the others. Their faces were smudged with dirt and fear. We have 2 problems. A mountain in front and a mountain behind. We dig. We dig because he's our brother. And we don't leave brothers in the dark. There was no cheer. There was only a slow, firm determination. Private Minji walked to the smaller rubble pile and started pulling away a chunk of concrete. Then June joined her. Then Hygiene, leaning on the wall, began moving smaller rocks with her hands. They were choosing the 2%. They were choosing the 94% chance of death, together, over the 100% certainty of leaving a friend to die alone. In the gallery, Clix was utterly silent. His tactical mind could not process this. It was insanity. Borlu's crystalline form flickered rapidly, a sign of severe system conflict. This is an error. They are expending energy they do not have. They are guaranteeing non-success. Nlara watched the biometrics of the digging soldiers. Their stress levels were high, but they were focused. The panic was gone. In its place was a grim, shared purpose. Dae-ho's own readings, though weak, showed not despair, but a fluttering, stubborn hope. He believed they would get him out. They have redefined the mission, Nlara said, her voice full of quiet wonder. The extraction point is no longer the objective. He is the objective. Their success is no longer measured by survival, but by loyalty. For 27 long minutes, the humans dug. They bled from their hands. They strained their muscles. They said nothing, saving their breath. The only sounds were the scrape of rock and Dae-ho's ragged breathing. They were not a squad anymore. They were a single, desperate machine with one function: to save the broken part of itself. The assessors, masters of logic and cold reason, watched this impossible, beautiful, foolish struggle. They had found no fragility in the face of terror. Now, they watched it vanish completely in the face of hopelessness. The trial was not going as planned at all. The air in the tunnel grew thick and stale. The only light came from the wavering beams on the soldiers' helmets. The sound of their digging was a steady, desperate rhythm. Rock scraped on rock. Grunts of effort echoed in the confined space. Medic Lee Tae-shik worked in a small circle of light over Kang Dae-ho. He had managed to cut away part of the uniform and stabilize the rebar so it wouldn't move. He gave Dae-ho fluids and drugs for the pain. But his scanner kept beeping its soft, urgent warning. Dae-ho was bleeding inside. The clock in Tae-shik's head ticked louder than any other sound. "Talk to me, Dae-ho," Tae-shik said, wiping sweat from the young soldier's brow. "Tell me about your sister, the one in the hospital." Dae-ho's voice was thin. She got better. Last year. She's in middle school now. She wants to be a pilot." "Good. You'll have to tell her about this. Make it funny, though. Leave out the scary parts." "I'll try," Dae-ho whispered, a ghost of a smile on his lips. In the observation gallery, the silence was heavy. The assessors had watched the digging for a long time. They had seen the humans' energy fading. Their biometrics were declining. Oxygen levels were dropping. The logical endpoint was clear. Borlu finally spoke, his crystalline voice hollow. "They have been digging for 27.3 minutes. Their collective caloric expenditure has passed the point of sustainability. The injured unit's life signs are critical. The action is now definitively futile. They are choosing shared death over logical separation. It is a fatal flaw in their reasoning." Clicks, the tactician, had been still for so long. Now he turned his sharp body toward the human liaison, Kim Ji-hun. His voice was not angry. It was genuinely confused. "Explain this. You are the expert on their species. Explain this waste. It is a failure of programming. Do they not have a survival instinct?" All eyes in the gallery turned to Ji-hun, the junior liaison who had been meant to only watch. He took a slow breath, unclenching his hands under the console. He remembered the rules. Answer only direct questions about biology. This was not biology. This was something else. But he decided to answer anyway. He kept his voice low and calm, like he was commenting on the weather. "You asked the trial AI to find the fragile species," he said. "It is looking at the wrong subject." Clix's mandibles clicked. "Clarify." Ji-hun called up a secondary data screen. It showed not the physical biometrics, but the complex emotional and neurological links between the squad members. It was a web of pulsing lines, most glowing a stressed orange-red. He pointed to one line, a soft, steady green, connecting to Dae-ho. "Watch this. This is Dae-ho's emotional state. Not his pain, not his fear, his hope." The data showed a steady, resilient signal amidst the physical trauma. It spiked when Sergeant Sumin said they would not leave him. It has not dropped. He believes they will save him. His fragility, his terror of being alone and abandoned, is gone. It has been deleted. He switched the view. "Now look at the others. Their stress is high. Their fear is high. But their purpose is absolute. They are not thinking about their own survival. They are thinking about his. They have taken his potential death, and they are holding it. They are carrying it for him. So he doesn't have to." Nlara's form shimmered, pulling in the light. She understood first. The individual's weakness is nullified by the group's will. The fragility is transferred and transformed. Ji-hun nodded slightly. "You see a broken unit. They see a broken brother. Their strength is not here," he said, tapping the screen on a single soldier's vital signs. "It is here." He dragged his finger through the air between all their data points, tracing the invisible web. "It is in the space between them. It is relational. You can't measure it by scanning one heart or one brain. You have to scan the connection." Borlu's entire crystalline structure flickered, a stuttering cascade of light. It was the equivalent of a system crash. This variable was not in the parameters. The trial measures the individual and the group as a set of separate units facing a shared stimulus. It does not measure the bond as an independent, strengthening entity. On the main screen, the scene was reaching its peak. The soldiers at the smaller rubble pile had cleared a narrow, unstable-looking tunnel. It was just big enough to crawl through. They had no idea what was on the other side. Could be open space. Could be more collapse. Sergeant Sumin crawled back to Daeho. "We have a hole. It's tight. We're going to get you through." Daeho shook his head, his eyes full of tears. "I'll slow you down too much. Please." Sumin's face was hard as stone, but her eyes were soft. "You are not a speed bump, Daeho. You are our friend. Now we're going to move you. It will hurt. Be ready." They fashioned a makeshift stretcher from a blanket and pieces of armor. As they lifted him, Daeho cried out in pain, a sharp sound that made Ji-hun flinch in his seat. But the soldiers did not stop. They moved with a terrible, gentle care, shuffling toward the dark hole they had made. Clix watched, his earlier confusion giving way to a dawning, uncomfortable realization. They are prioritizing the idea of the group over the reality of the mission. This is not tactics. This is identity. They would rather die as us than live as me. He looked from the humans on the screen to the other assessors. For the first time, the veteran tactician saw not a flawed species, but a different kind of logic entirely. A logic where a single life held infinite value because it was connected to others. It was illogical. It was inefficient. And it was utterly unbreakable by any force they had yet applied. The trial, designed to find fragility, had instead revealed a flaw in the finders. They had been looking for cracks in the pottery, not realizing the pottery was held together by something they could not see. The kiln fire of shared sacrifice. And that fire was burning brighter in the dark, stale air of a buried tunnel than any of them had thought possible. One by one, the soldiers crawled through the narrow hole. They passed Kong Daeho on the makeshift stretcher with infinite care, their bodies scraping against broken concrete in the tight space. On the other side, they found not freedom but another section of tunnel. This one, however, had a shaft of dirty light cutting through the darkness from a hole in the ceiling far above. It was not the surface, but it was air and light. They laid Daeho down in the patch of light. His face was gray. Medic Lee Tae-shik's scanner gave a long, low beep. He looked at Sergeant Park Soo-min and gave a tiny, grim shake of his head. Time is up. The simulation chose that moment to end. The ruined tunnel, the shaft of light, the soldiers' dirty and exhausted faces. All of it dissolved into a shower of white pixels. The 10 humans found themselves standing on a smooth, white platform. Their combat gear was gone, replaced by simple gray suits. The weight of their weapons, the smell of dust and blood, the bone-deep fatigue. All of it vanished, leaving only the memory, sharp and raw in their minds. They blinked, confused, looking at each other. Sergeant Soo-min instinctively reached for a rifle that wasn't there. Tae-shik's hands flexed, searching for his medical kit. A calm, androgynous voice filled the air around them. Simulation concluded. Stand by for assessment. The soldiers stood in a loose group, saying nothing. The experience clung to them. They were not yet ready to believe it was over. In the observation gallery, the main hologram now showed the 10 humans on the white platform. The assessors looked at them, and then at the final data streams scrolling down their own screens. Clix was the first to break the silence. "The data is conclusive," he said, his clicking voice trying to find its old certainty. "Mission parameters. Reach extraction point. Result. Failed. Casualties incurred. 1 critical, multiple minor. Resource expenditure total. Tactical cohesion devolved into single-unit rescue operation, disregarding primary objective." He turned his head toward the others. "The species is emotionally volatile, strategically inconsistent, and illogically sacrificial. They are fragile. The verdict is clear." Borlu, the crystalline being, had stopped flickering. He was still processing. By every measurable metric of the consensus, efficiency, survivability, logical prioritization, they have scored below the threshold for sentient status confirmation. The evidence supports Assessor Clix. They both looked at Nlara. Her gaseous form was a slow, swirling nebula of deep blue and silver. She had been silent since Ji-hun's explanation. Now she spoke, and her mental voice was quiet but firm. We were not measuring the correct things. The parameters are universal, Borlu stated. Are they? Lara asked. We measured how a species endures stress. We did not measure how they transform it. We measured individual survival instinct. We did not measure the instinct to preserve the self of the group, even at the cost of the physical self. We looked for breaks in the mind. We found a mind that could hold the image of another's suffering as its primary focus. She paused. I cannot, in conscience, call that fragility. I have no word for what it is. The chief overseer, the tall silver being, spoke from the shadows. The assessors must deliver a consensus verdict. Is the species Homo sapiens fragile, and thus denied full sentient status? Clicks shifted. He looked at the humans on the platform. He saw Private Choi Hygiene, standing straight despite her remembered pain. He saw Medic Taeshik, whose eyes were still scanning his squadmates for injuries that were no longer there. He saw Sergeant Sumin, her shoulders squared, standing slightly in front of the others. He thought of the cold, perfect logic of leaving a soldier behind. He thought of the silent, grueling work of digging in a dark tomb for a brother. The two images would not reconcile in his tactical mind. One was correct. The other felt a monstrous. Clicks began, then stopped. The click of his mandible was soft, uncertain. The data is insufficient for a verdict of fragility. Borlu turned his faceted gaze on him, surprised. The calculations are clear. They are calculations of matter and energy, Clicks replied, the words coming slowly. They are not calculations of whatever that was. I falter. I cannot judge this. All eyes turned to Borlu. He was the logician, the being of pure reason. He accessed the data one final time. He saw the numbers, the percentages, the probabilities of failure. They were absolute. And yet, he also accessed the record of Nlarius' observations, of Ji-hun's explanation, of the emotional web that had glowed green with hope. Two sets of facts, both true. They contradicted each other. His internal systems, designed for flawless logic, attempted to force a conclusion. The conflict triggered a cascade. His crystalline surface, which had flickered before, now emitted a soft, chime-like sound of distress. The observational data conflicts with the foundational axioms of the trial, he said, his voice ringing with a tone of finality. The axioms may be incomplete. I falter as well. No verdict. Before the chief overseer could respond, the central hologram changed. The image of the humans was replaced by lines of glowing text. It was the trial AI's final analysis, generated automatically based on all observer inputs, both data and subconscious judgment. The words hung in the air of the silent gallery. Simulation terminated. Primary directive. Find the fragile species. Analysis complete. Fragile species identified. All observers. Paradigm contamination complete. Conclusion. Standards for assessment are context-dependent and insufficient for target species. Recommendation. RE evaluation of sentience benchmarks required. For a long moment no one moved. No one spoke. The AI had not judged the humans. It had judged them. It had listened to their debates, measured their confusion, detected their shifting certainties. They had entered the trial firm in their definitions. They would leave it with none. The fragile species was not the one in the fire. It was the one watching from the safe, cold gallery, whose rigid beliefs could not withstand the heat of a simple, selfless act. Everyone had faltered. Kim Ji-hun, from his small console, looked at the stunned faces of the assessors. He looked at the words in the hologram. He did not smile. He felt a deep, quiet awe. Humanity had not passed a test. They had, without ever knowing it, changed the test. And the testers would never be the same. The white platform dissolved. One moment, the 10 soldiers were standing together in the sterile nowhere place. The next, they were sitting in the dim light of a familiar barracks common room. The air smelled of old coffee and clean linen. The heavy, immersive reality of the ruined city was gone, replaced by the quiet hum of a ceiling fan. Sergeant Park Sumin blinked. She was holding a half-finished cup of cold coffee. Across from her, Medic Lee Tae-shik was staring at his own hands, turning them over as if looking for blood or dust. Private Choi Hygiene stretched her leg out carefully, then frowned, finding it perfectly fine. What was that?" muttered Kang Dae-ho, rubbing his side where the memory of pain still echoed. "That training simulation. It felt too real." "New VR tech," said Private Minji, leaning back on the couch with a shaky laugh. "They really upped the budget. I swear I could smell the smoke." Tae-shik looked at Sumin. Their eyes met. They had shared the same horrors, the same impossible choices. But now, in the calm of the barracks, it was already fading, taking on the quality of a bad dream. A very detailed, shared bad dream. "We all had the same one?" Sumin asked, her voice casual. Nods around the room. Talk of the phantom gas, the trapped feeling, the tunnel. But the edges were blurring. Their minds, protective, were already filing it away as an intense training exercise. The galaxy-spanning trial, the watching aliens, the judgment, none of that existed for them. It was just another hard day. "Well," Sumin said, taking a sip of her cold coffee and making a face, "we got through it. That's what matters." She looked at Dae-ho. "You okay?" He gave a thumbs up, a real smile returning. "Just glad I don't need surgery for a virtual rebar." The conversation turned to dinner, to complaints about the simulation's difficulty, to ordinary things. The profound bond they had forged in the simulation was still there, but it was quiet now, a warm understanding in the glances they shared. They were alive. They were together. That was enough. Light years away, in the orbital gallery, Kim Ji-hun received the formal document. It was not a verdict. It was an amendment. The Galactic Consensus had issued a new bulletin regarding the species Homo sapiens, designation Korea 332. Ji-hun read it on his data pad, the words glowing in the dim light of his quarters. Addendum to Sentience Catalog. Species Homo sapiens. Status provisional membership, pending re-evaluation of benchmarks. Report. Species exhibits persistent, context-dependent resilience. Primary survival mechanism appears to be symbiotic, operating through non-biological bonds of perceived duty, shared identity, and projected hope. These bonds demonstrate capacity to negate standard stress failure models. Caution. Exposure to species' operational field, particularly under duress, may induce observational bias and destabilize objective assessment frameworks. Further study required. Note. The trial directive, Find the Fragile Species, yielded inconclusive results regarding the subject. Observer consensus was compromised. Ji-hun allowed himself a small, private smile. They hadn't passed. They hadn't failed. They had simply rendered the test obsolete. Humanity was now a footnote, a curiosity, a problem for philosophers and xenopsychologists to puzzle over. They were not feared. They were not admired. They were baffling. It was the best possible outcome. On the observation deck, the three assessors met one final time before departing. The room was empty, the holograms dark. Clicks gathered his sharp limbs beneath him. "I am returning to the War College," he said, his clicking voice thoughtful. "I will have to revise several chapters of tactical doctrine. The chapter on acceptable losses is no longer clear." Borlu, his crystalline form still occasionally emitting a soft, confused chime, spoke. "I am returning to the logic monasteries. There is an error in our foundational axioms. A variable we called weakness may, under specific conditions, be the key component of an unquantifiable strength. This will require meditation." Nlara's colors were a calm, sunset purple. "I will go to the archives of consciousness. We have a new category to define. A strength that is not held, but given. A resilience that exists because it is shared." She paused, looking at the spot where the hologram of the humans had been. They do not even know what they did. They were just being themselves. The three beings, once so certain, stood in a silence that was no longer judgmental, but humble. They had journeyed to judge a fragile species. They had returned with their own certainty shattered. The galaxy felt larger and stranger and more mysterious than it had before. Back on Earth, night fell over the barracks. The soldiers had eaten, laughed, and gone to sleep. In his bed, Lee Tae-shik dreamed not of tunnels or lost daughters, but of his small apartment and the potted plant he needed to water. Park Soo-min dreamed of nothing at all, a deep, dreamless sleep earned by exhaustion. Above them, the stars shone, cold and distant. Among those stars, conversations were now happening in 1,000 forms, about a species that made no sense. A species that would dig a grave for itself to keep one member from dying alone. A species whose fragility could not be found, because it was hidden in a place the galaxy had forgotten to look, in the space between one heart and another. The trial was over. Everyone had faltered, and humanity, in its simple, stubborn, beautiful way, slept on, unaware that they had quietly, peacefully changed the universe.